Hello, and welcome back to Radio 2, Part 3 of Advanced Content Creation. So in the previous lesson, we had a look at morning radio or breakfast radio, and we played a few clips, and we looked at what you needed for powerful radio, things like keeping it personal, over-prep the day before, do the things your listeners do, speak concisely, drink water, be funny, be specific, be vulnerable, be nice, move it along, make sure you prep well enough. So we really went into detail in this lesson. Today we'll be continuing with where we left off by starting with lecture 11, which is informative and entertaining content, and then we're going to look at something called FUBI. So if we start off with informative and entertaining content, the most important part of any radio show or content piece is to keep a listener engaged and listening for as long as possible. From a commercial perspective, the longer you can keep the listener engaged, the more advertising they will hear and the more effective the advertising will be, which means it's a better return on investment or ROI for the client. If there's no advertising, the content is still considered paid for by the user. For example, if a user downloads a podcast, it takes time and effort and sometimes, well, most of the times, data. A disengaged user is less likely to buy another piece of content with their data and time. From a public broadcasting perspective, no value can be put on a piece of disengaging audio. The number one rule in radio is therefore to keep the listener listening for longer. So how do you do that? How do you keep a listener listening for longer? How do you keep them tuned in? This means listening longer to the current piece they are listening to and listening longer by coming back to the radio station or series of content for more. So that's in essence what you're looking for. Every radio station wants you to tune in every time you get into the car, and every podcast creator wants you to come back to their channel. The techniques and formulas that we'll be looking at were all created through anecdotal and peer-reviewed research to help fulfill this mandate of keeping the listener engaged for longer and coming back for more. What goes into a radio show or a podcast? If we think about it in terms of a business model, in business, every product goes through life cycles or life stages. So these phases are commonly grouped into 4 different categories, which is the introduction phase, the growth phase, the maturity phase, and lastly, the decline phase. So you can see in this image, that is literally the 4 phases that we show you. So we show how you grow with the introduction phase. The growth continues in the growing phase. It peaks in the maturity phase, and then there's a steep decline in the last phase. This product or service life cycle makes the following 3 widely accepted assumptions. Products have a limited life cycle. The success or sale of that product goes through these 4 stages, and these all offer up different challenges and opportunities. And thirdly, in every phase, the business has to work on different strategies to ensure the success of the product. Radio shows are no different. They go through these 4 stages, and each requires different strategies and techniques to navigate. So Tracy Johnson provides us with a formula for every single one of these 4 stages. His formula includes the percentage of the types of content mixes one should start including for success in every one of these phases of the show. If we start with the first one, the introduction phase. So this phase can be seen as equal to going into a bar, looking around, making eye contact with someone, and going up to them in the bar for the first time. This is the phase a radio show is in the first 18 months of it being on air. We as the listeners are trying to get to know the people on air. If you were to make a list of things you would not have an in-depth a discussion about the first time you meet someone, it would likely be religion, politics, your sexual history, their sexual history, your controversial worldviews, embarrassing topics, and things like personal details that may push the new person away. On the other hand, things you might talk about may include something you have in common, the song you just heard playing, the entertaining barman, the great DJ, your favorite types of entertainment, such as a series you're enjoying or an album you've just downloaded that they might be able to relate to, general relationship topics, general lifestyle topics, personal but not private, observations about the shared space you are both inhabiting at the moment. And this is then the same approach one should take for a new show. According to Tracy Johnson, this is what the percentages of content mix should look like in a new show. By new, we mean the first 18 months. So the breakdown here then, 35% station and promotion, 35% features and benchmarks, 20% lifestyle or relationships, and 10% personal observation. So if we compare things you might talk about when meeting someone the first time to Johnson's percentage of content categories, then we'll come up with something like this. So on the content side, something you might have in common, the song you just heard playing, the entertaining barman or a great DJ, would in radio terms or radio content be the station and promotion. In content terms, your favorite type of entertainment, such as a Netflix series you're enjoying or an album you've just downloaded that they might be able to relate to, in radio content would be your features and your benchmarks. On the content side, general relationship topics. On the radio content side, relationship content. Content, general lifestyle topics. Radio content, lifestyle content. Last one on the content side, personal but not private observations about the shared space you're both in. Radio content side, personal observations. So that's the breakdown of a show. Now, when planning an hour of a new radio show, you should structure your time as follows. So the station and promotion is the topic. The content would be information about what is happening on the station, in your city, your country, and around the world, and what is happening on your show. Time spent talking about it, 35% of that hour. Topic, features and benchmarks. So the content you would use is have entertaining, engaging, relevant, and relatable features or benchmark moments where listeners play along, such as games. This is also 35% of your time in that hour. We speak about the relationship content. On the content side, include relatable relationship discussions or stories. That, together with the lifestyle content, which then from a content perspective includes stories or discussions about a common lifestyle, would make up 20%. And then the last 10% of your time would be made up by personal observations, including your own observations about relatable topics. When it comes to a link, it's something that we keep talking about. It's one of those radio slang words that gets thrown a lot, thrown around often. Links are the time that a presenter uses to talk about something that has just happened. So a song that's just played, a news bulletin that was read, or whatever just happened. And to introduce something that is about to happen. So a competition, a story they're about to tell, might be entering the news. So link comes in from both sides. If we now take the time that we just put, so that 35%, 35, 20, and 10%, and we make a link out of it, we're saying that 5 links should be spent on station and promotion, 5 links on features and benchmarks, 3 links on either relationship content or lifestyle content, and 1 link on personal observations. So there's not a lot of personal feel in this introduction phase. From the introduction phase, we move up to the growth phase. The growth phase is the stage of a relationship where you have gotten to know the other person already. This is the phase where you're falling in love and you begin to be more accepting of each other's flaws while still learning about each other. You start sharing more personal information, potentially more embarrassing stories, and some of your more controversial beliefs or worldviews. So again, the same can be said for a radio station's relationship with its listeners. Learning theory tells us that repetition is key to really knowing and understanding something. After listening to a presenter or on-air show for about 18 months, you will either like or dislike them and either continue listening to them or not. Let's assume the relationship is about 18 months old now and going steady. The list of topics you talk about in the relationship has grown, and the list of taboo subjects has diminished. Your personal opinions begin to matter more. You begin to share your heart, your longings, your desires. You become more intimate with your partner. This is the same formula for success in the growth phase of radio. If we look at the content mix under the growth phase, you'll see that personal observation has grown from 10 to 20%. And there's a new mix in here now, heart, which is on 5%, which wasn't in the previous one. Station and promotion has gone down to 20%. Lifestyle/relationship has gone up to 25%. And features and benchmarks have also gone down a bit. So here what happened is that you start slowing down and speak less about the station, and you talk more about human interest topics. And you do more relevant content pieces. When we plan an hour of a radio show in the growth phase, this is the structure that should be taken into account. Station and promotion is here on 20% from 35% in the previous one. Features and benchmarks has gone down with 5% to 30%. Relationship content and lifestyle content together is now on 25%, gone up with 5%. Personal observations gone up with 10% to 20%. Heart came in with 5%. The content here includes emotional, personal experiences and opinions. If we look at how we would structure a show with 15 links by dividing it up, your station promo, which takes up 20% of your time, would now be 3 links. Your features and benchmarks, which take up 30%, would now be 5 links. Between relationship content and lifestyle content, which makes up 25%, it would be 3 links. Personal observation, that gets 20% of the time, is 3 links. And then last, heart, which is 5%, gets 1 link. Now we're moving into the third phase. So we're peaking now on the maturity phase. In the maturity phase, the radio show has reached the point where new growth is generally small and the base listenership, who tune in regularly, is robust and valuable. When a show enters this phase, it usually means that it has been successful in building an extensive audience base. This phase is where advertisers will get the best bang for their buck, or podcasts get into the top 10 most downloaded podcasts weekly. In this phase, the content offering shifts away from material about the station as a whole to material about the show and its character, their personal opinions, the heart of the show, and its emotive value. Look at this breakdown now. Station and promotion, features and benchmarks, lifestyles/relationship, and personal observations are now all 3 on 25% each, so equal time. Station and promotion is now down to 15%, and heart is up to 10%. So a lot more personal opinions, a lot more emotions coming through. So here, once again, we're breaking down, we're planning an hour of a radio show in the maturity phase. Station and promotion gets only 15% of the talk time. Features and benchmarks get 25%. Relationship content and lifestyle content together get 25%. Personal observations get 25%. Heart gets 10%. And then if we look at what we should do with our 15 links, Station and promotion, which is 15%, only gets 2 links now. So this will now rotate between 1 and 2 links per show. The features and benchmarks, which get 25%, now have 4 links. Relationship and lifestyle content, 25% will have 4 links. Personal observation, also 25% will have 4 links. And lastly, the heart, which has 10%, will now have 2 links. And here we'll also rotate between 1 and 2 links per show. So what happens now after our maturity phase? In this case, we are now entering the decline phase. This is the phase that every radio presenter dreads, as this is the phase where the audience's response begins to wane. The numbers and ratings start to fall and the listeners begin to move away. When the show begins to reach this phase, it's a great idea to reset the show. This could mean removing certain characters, replacing other characters, adding in new characters, or in very extreme cases, moving time channels. There have been many successful resting periods that have been implemented where legacy shows have replaced characters and bought themselves many more years on the show. Introducing new characters or moving time slots means you can take your show back into the first introductory phase. It breathes a new light into the show and creates an exciting, unique opportunity for both old, much-loved and new, fresher characters. Every show has an expiry date. As painful as this sounds, in order to escape the expiry, one needs to adapt and change things up. If your show is not a new show and you don't know what phase you're in, or if you think all this seems rather formulaic and complicated, you could use a more basic hierarchy of content to help you develop your show. A hierarchy of content divides content into 3 levels. The first level involves content such as storytelling, and it appeals to your emotions. Great stories take listeners on journeys, they spark the imagination, and they delight people. Stories are also used to create perspective and to add dramatic moments to a radio show. If we look at the second level, this involves features, benchmarks, and other recurring pieces of content. It also includes entertaining, exciting, and recurring content that adds structure to the listening experience. Here you can include games, contests, and promotions in this category, as long as you are implementing the competition to create entertainment in the sense of entertainment for the non-participating listener. Things like Hollywood reports and music features will fall into this category. The listener expects them and wants to hear them at a specific time. The third level consists of generic content. Generic content, filler material, and reading published lists fall into this category. Things like birthday announcements and horoscopes and human interest stories that fill time more than really engage the audience, all form part of this category. The hierarchy of these content levels should be 60% for level 1, 30% for level 2, and 10% for level 3. So if we now look at how you'd plan to do your show with 15 links, how you would divide it up is by giving 9 links, which is 60% of the time, to topics such as stories about the station, your show, your life, others' lives, features that include storytelling. You would give 5 links, or 30% of the time, to features and benchmarks, and you would give 2 links, or 10% of the time, to generic content. Using either the hierarchy content plan or the product lifestyle stages method for planning a show will give you an excellent framework to design the type of content you need to place in your radio show to make it entertaining and engaging. So it doesn't really matter which one of these 2 methods you use. A winning radio show follows what Johnson calls a series of one. This involves executing one thing on the show. So executing one thing every quarter hour that commands the listener's attention, one thing every hour that causes a definite emotive response, one thing per day that your audience would share with their friends, one thing every 3 months that people will remember the show by, and one thing every year that will make your show legendary. To help in the planning of show formats, here is a list of content types that are typically found on successful music radio shows. This is on page 105 in your textbook. So if we look at them, they are characters, stories, and storylines, serialized content, so content that can follow from the previous day and then follow on tomorrow. Out of studio recordings or live crossings, for example, voices from listeners and a word on the street. Radio people call these vox pops. Listener games or features, these drive engagement for the show. Guest interviews. Everyone wants to hear opinions from people they don't know personally, and a good show facilitates that. Phone topics, so it facilitates interaction between the listener and the presenters. Produce skits, sketches, and parodies. Holidays, so something like Christmas content. And events, so concerts, sport events, etc. Obviously, not so much in COVID. Something new and buzzworthy, a new ad, a new TV show, a new series, a new book. Level 1 of COVID, and then video and viral pieces, so either created by the show or found and discussed by them. You'll notice here that in this example that's still on the screen with Tracy Johnson and the content types we just spoke about, I did not mention news, the weather, the traffic, or sport news. These are very important parts of a show, and it will be discussed in detail further down. But for now, I want us to look at something called the GIFS system of radio content design. So this is on page 106 in your handbook. The GIFS system is used by Tracy Johnson to help set up the content profile of a radio show that gives a radio station the best chance to improve quickly. GIFS stands for Games, Information, Funny, and Story. So GIFS is a system that radio presenters and producers can use to create and program their content so their personalities stand out. So the first letter there, G, is for games. Games are a big part of our lives. Throughout our whole life, we have played games and we will continue to play games. So whether it's children's games, whether it's sport games as adults, bingo when you're in a nursing home, games are a vital part of our entertainment. And copying this on air is an essential part of any radio station's content mix. On-air radio shows should be designed in such a way that listeners in the car can play along. So this is then called the passive-active listener. Passive in the sense that they are not on the line talking to the presenter, and active in the sense that they're playing along from wherever they are. I is for information. Johnson says this is a broad category that could include news, weather, traffic, and sports. Or it could be events happening in the community or an entertainment report. It may be a style and fashion update. This could include a daily feature. We should think of this category as a demonstration to the listener that you're in touch with what's happening in their world. F is for funny. Remember what we said, nothing beats funny on air. Make listeners laugh and you own them. Think about people you've dated. I'm sure somewhere along the line you've dated someone who was funny and you were attracted to them because they were funny. But you have to be truly funny or at least create funny situations. And then lastly here, S is for story. So storytelling is probably the most crucial part of any radio presenter's content repertoire. Not everyone is a great storyteller from the start, but this is something you can learn. You can learn to become a much better storyteller by studying it. To program the GIF system, Johnson recommends that you start by deciding what percentages each of the 4 categories should represent on your show. A few shows will be a strict 25% for each category. Maybe you're 50% funny, 30% story, and 10% information and games. Find your ideal formula and then start to create features and hold GIFs. Now we'll look at something that's first called FUBI and that will become FUBI. So according to a study that was conducted by the Emotional Intelligence Agency, or the EIA, and the Internet and Data Strategy Company, it was determined that there are 4 kinds of emotionally compelling content that we should focus on, and these are funny, useful, beautiful, and inspiring content. If we look at each of these segments under funny, if we look at each of these 4 segments, it's broken down into smaller subcategories. Under the first one, funny, we find parody, slapstick, satire, potty, and black. Under useful, we find consumer reviews, social good, news analysis, news updates, and wonder. Under inspiring, we have ideals, spiritual, weird, biographical, heartwarming. And lastly, under beautiful, we have sensual, pop, extravagant, minimalist, and cute. So this is the FUBI wheel. From an audio creation or radio perspective, FUBI can be translated into FUBI, so with an extra B, and that B stands for bold, meaning the content presented must challenge what has been traditionally aired on radio by being courageous and daring. This can be developing new ideas or taking a fresh approach to some old ideas, such as hosting a very different type of interview. So in summary, every piece of audio content that is created needs to be FUBI: fun, useful, bold, beautiful, inspiring. If your content satisfies the FUBI standards, it is more likely to emotionally connect with listeners. What I want you to do now is, in the previous lesson, I asked you to identify the elements of all 3 show links and tell me about their personality bits, time, show prep, examples of the host life, etc. Now what I want you to do is to identify again the elements of all 3 show links, but now you'll be using FUBI and the GIFs method to describe this for me. Okay, so you have 2 pieces of homework for me. The first is to complete activity 3C on page 109 in Next Level Radio. And the questions there are, number 1, explain in your own words why it is important for any podcast or radio show to strive for informative and entertaining content. Number 2, name the 4 product stages in the life cycle of a radio show. For each stage, explain how the stage impacts the creation of content for the show. And thirdly, explain what a link is, and using the hierarchy of content model, plan out how many links you would use for each level of the content hierarchy in a 15-link show. And then the second piece of homework there, identify the elements of all 3 given show links. So in other words, Kaya FM, Metro FM, and East Coast Radio. Using FUBI and the GIFs method. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. Please remember to listen to the different radio stations, listen to the content pieces, and listen to how they're broken up. Until next time, bye.